Welcome, movie fans. Thanks for joining us for episode 101 of Reading Between the Reels, the premier podcast of MFers trying to ice skate uphill. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. If you've been enjoying the show, please subscribe and review us on iTunes or Spotify. You can also support the show by posting on your socials and joining our Facebook group. I'm Craig Dickinson, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Corey Heidschmidt. Justin's out tonight, but Corey is here. How's it going, Corey?
Oh, it's good. You know what? I feel like Justin's out tonight. It's kind of like when the varsity player is sick and then the JV player gets a chance to step in for that playing time. And that's what I'm here for, baby.
There we go.
Thank you, Justin.
We'll step it up. Next man up. We're going to try a new segment tonight, Corey. I don't know if we talked about this off air, but Justin and I talked about this a little bit at lunch.
I love surprises.
Okay. And we're going to call it, what have you been watching this week? So like what movies or TV shows since the last time we recorded have you really enjoyed or catching up on or rewatching? So anything in particular that you have been watching?
Actually, yes. I just wrapped up last week. I wrapped up Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined 4 seasons. Just got finished up with Will Adama and those dang Cylons. And every time I watch that, I take more away from it. I absolutely love sci-fi series. I love those things. And then I also wrapped up Picard season 1. So a lot of people don't know this. I'm kind of a sci-fi guy. I love movies like that. So Battlestar Galactica, Picard season 1. I'm about to head to Picard season 2, but I'm debating going back and watching Star Trek Next Generation again, starting over. Because it's nostalgic. I love that series. Kind of watched a little bit here and there as a kid. My brother was real big into Star Trek, and that kind of got me going later. So that's what I've been watching. What about you, Craig?
Well, I actually just finished. I've been trying to watch Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined one. I did not watch when it was on, and now it's on Prime. I know you've been a big proponent of that for a while. I'm in season 2. I think I'm in the second episode. That's as far as I've gotten. It's okay. I'm hoping it's going to pick up.
Yes,
it's fine.
Season 2 is when it starts to kick in a little bit.
Okay.
And remember, the thing about this isn't just a typical sci-fi movie. I mean, it is all that, but there's a lot on the human condition in this.
Yeah, a
lot on what people are like, and there's some great speeches with stuff that's going to happen. That you look at and you go, man, that is applicable to life. So
yeah.
What else?
Other than that, I've watched the first 4 episodes of The Walking Dead. I've never watched it until now.
Oh,
so I'm starting to watch that a little bit. And I'm just kind of binging a lot of Superman stuff with the trailer for Superman, the Christopher Reeve documentary that came out. Since our last episode, I rewatched Superman 2, the theatrical cut, which I hadn't seen in a while. I watched the Donner cut multiple times since then. And I even watched Superman 3, which I hadn't seen in forever. And it's horrible. It's so bad. But It's on Prime right now. I've been watching a lot of Prime. They also had the Man with No Name trilogy, the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. I watched all 3 of those in the last couple weeks and enjoyed most of those. I definitely think that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is far and away the better. I think that they got progressively better farther in. So
yeah.
But we're not talking about that tonight. Tonight we're starting our series, Marvel Before the MCU, and we start with 1998's Blade. So Corey,
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yes.
No, I was just going to say,
talking about Blade. Now, wait, Blade's in the MCU now. We've got to throw this in there.
Well, yeah.
This has
officially with Deadpool and Wolverine, which, we mentioned this on our 100th episode, which if you haven't checked that out, it was just a blast with our Film Lovers Roundtable with some really, really great guests. We talked a little bit about the fact that we're doing these series, and we had really just kind of planned to do series, and then Deadpool and Wolverine made it very obvious that we should do Marvel movies and to kind of go back in the decade before Iron Man. So 98 through 2007, there's 16 movies in there that we're going to take a look at. And Blade from 98 is the first one. So I'm curious, Corey, what's your first experience with Blade and what are your overall thoughts on that film?
So I remember watching Blade when I was a kid and it came out 1998. I was in college. We went and watched it. Thought it was a great movie. Liked it. A little bit dark for me, but watching it now, I'm going to tell you what, it took a different spin. I really kind of thinking, having seen him in the Deadpool Wolverine, and then knew him. We were coming back to this podcast, went back and watched him. So I watched him with some different lens. This is a movie that holds up, I think. The special effects, a couple spots are a little bit, but this is Wesley Snipes in his prime. This is absolute fantastic peak of who he was as an actor and martial arts in this movie. The fight scenes hold up very well. They're a little hokey in the 90s term. This is the 90s where one punch knockouts and, some guy does a spinning roundhouse kick that, and the guy sits there and waits for it to be delivered. And so, there's some of that gets into this. But overall, here's the thing that I like about this movie. This was, in my mind, I've seen all these superheroes movies for these last years. This was a perfect way to establish it. He pops in the very beginning, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's Blade. And from then on, we know who he is. We've already established that this guy has already existed. I don't need a long 90-minute backstory to get to who he is for a 10-minute fight at the end where he rises up and becomes Blade. He's established as Blade. We already know, and we've already embraced it. Even if I've never read a comic, I know he is obviously some awesome superhero who's going to fight these vampires. So you establish that, and it's better than some of these movies they keep coming up with where it's like, oh, okay, we got a new actor playing the lead role, we got to reinvent it and redo the establishment role of who the superhero is, the backstory. So in my mind, I look at that now, and it was refreshing. It's refreshing to go back to the beginning and say, that's how we should get some of these superhero movies. Don't give me these reboots. Just go with it from here. We know it's Blade. We know it's Batman. We know it's the Fantastic Four. Stop making me reboot and watch 90 minutes of, well, you got to establish their backstory. It's a little different than the other backstory. So other than that, there's some hokey things that I'm like, well, that was 90s. But great story, good arc. The good characters are pretty good in there. The main villain guy is kind of hokey for me. Reminds me a little much of Corey Feldman, but in a couple scenes. But good art, good characters, and just an overall good story.
Yeah. I have one quick question for you. Did you know who Blade was before you saw the movie?
No, never.
Okay. So
I'd never read a comic about it. I was never much into comics at all. So yeah. But I like these types of movies.
Yeah, I hadn't seen him in the comics. I'd read a handful of Batman comics when I was younger. That's kind of where I was. I was more of a DC guy growing up in the 80s. But I did see Blade on the Spider-Man cartoon, the animated show that came out in the mid to late 90s. That came out before this. And so I had seen the character once or twice. He had like a lightsaber or something. It was weird. But I remember, I knew who he was. He was like in a show with Morbius and whatnot. So I knew briefly who the character was going in. I knew this was going to be a Marvel movie, although I think they were really, really smart in the way they marketed this, that it was almost incidental that it was Marvel. Like, it's an action movie with vampires. And,
okay.
What I think what's really interesting about this is, we could have gone even farther back. If we really wanted to do Marvel movies, we could have included, before the MCU, we could have included Howard the Duck or some of these really cheesy, like, Roger Corman's Fantastic Four, whatnot. But I think what's important about Blade is that this proves that the Marvel brand can be translated into successful films. This is the first one that does that, and our next film, X-Men, gets a lot of the credit for that. And Spider-Man does as well. Say, hey, we can do a blockbuster comic book movie. But if it wasn't for Blade, and I've seen Ryan Reynolds talk about this recently too, Blade really opened the door for that. And as a hard R rated movie with a character you've never heard of, just in Wesley Snipes, a fairly big star, but like it has to stand up on its own. You have to introduce all this, and I love that you brought up that it's not an origin story. We don't need that.
Yep.
He's fully formed the way he is, and I would love to see more of that going through. I think the DCU, James Gunn's DCU, is going to do that a little bit. You're already seeing some of that with the Superman movie, where there's it's a fully established universe. There's like other superheroes are already in it. I heard today that for they're casting Green Lantern, and what like Josh Brolin is one of the possibilities. Matthew McConaughey is a possibility. So they're clearly not casting young guys for that.
Yeah.
So we'd be an established hero. So I'm kind of, yes, we're getting that away from the having to be an origin story every time. So I'm in favor of that for sure.
That's the part that I just, because it's that same burnout on that is watching this huge origin. It was so refreshing because after watching this, because honestly, I did not remember much of this movie at all. And so when I watched it for the podcast, it was refreshing for me to go, opening credit, here's his mom. She's been bit by a vampire and she's giving birth. Okay, well, that's probably going to make his blood special over everybody else's, right? In 30 seconds, I got an origin story.
Yep.
Fantastic. And then right after that big fight, he goes to an established lair. He has an established partner with Chris Christopherson, and then he's got an established name. Like, it's already there for me. And then they do it again in the elevator scene. Do you remember that elevator scene where he gets in there and you see the neck tattoos on people? Well, the camera points at that, and that's a very big, like, okay, we're going to emphasize this. So you see these neck tattoos, and you're like, oh, okay, what's with these neck tattoos, right? I got vampires with long teeth. Now what's this? And he gives her a two-sentence explanation that says, oh, those are people that they're not vampires, but they belong to this person. If you mess with them, you mess with that vampire. And so then you're like, okay, great. Now I know there's a whole host of people that aren't vampires. Because I was thinking, oh, is he only fighting vampires? Nope, he's getting people too because they're in with the vampires. And so it, and the one guy at the end says, I just work here. And it's like, okay, okay, there's humans mixed in here too that are on the wrong side. So you established all that, you did all this, and it didn't take, 50 minutes of screen time to do it.
Yeah.
Just a few sentences of dialogue.
Yeah. I think I agree. You said earlier too that the film holds up. Yes, some of the special effects are a little dated. Some of the early CGI stuff doesn't quite work, but I think for the most part, the film really does hold up. It's definitely hyper violent and yet fun.
Yes.
And it takes itself seriously, but not overly so. It's not heavy. Like, it's a fun, hyper violent, but also serious. There's some pathos in there a little bit.
Yes. There is some hokiness that happens in this movie, but and we can get to that later. But
yeah, we will.
Definitely some scenes where I was like, "Oh, am I watching the Matrix Revolutions right now?" I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I mentioned the pathos. Like, even when Whistler dies, so to speak, spoiler for the second one, like, that's a moment that you feel with this limited screen time, you've come to really appreciate who that character is. And you can see that Blade is, feeling that he's feeling the pain of his mentor dying too. So like, there's moments of levity and there's definitely moments of like actual drama in this film too. So well-balanced film, I think.
And he was gritty. He was a gritty character. I liked him. I forgot because I don't remember anything about the second one, and I don't even think I watched the third one, actually.
I'm so excited for you.
Is Chris Christopherson come back? I kind of hoped he was because I was mad they killed him off.
I can't tell you that.
Spoilers don't hurt me.
Yeah, he's back in the next one.
All right, because that's what I'm saying. He was. Oh yeah, I see. He's right here.
Yeah.
And he is such a good character and such a good actor. I just love him. So when he died, I was like, man, this show. I was mad about it.
Yeah. So let's jump into some of the nuts and bolts of what we like about this movie. Cinematography, the editing is so fast in this, and it's very kinetic. But as far as composition, color, camera work, what are some things that you noticed on this viewing for Blade?
First off, can we get some more lights in the show? Like, there's darkness everywhere, and it really sets the tone. It's a dark world. It's an underworld, right? I get that. But like the 12, all the vampire original guys meeting as the boardroom kind of thing. That is the darkest room I've ever seen in my life.
It's very dark.
You can't even see what they're doing. You just see faces in there. And so they do all that, and I know they're setting a scene and a tone. But it was like some 10-watt bulbs in everything that they were using. So I was a little surprised by that for color. But there's a bluish color in everything. I felt like a lot of it. Yeah. It's kind of how Matrix always had a greenish tint. This has a very bluish tint through everything. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely saw that a lot, especially in the flashback, and then in the meat processing plant at the beginning, and then really most of the film. And so that's kind of this kind of cold, depressing, kind of heavy, kind of lends itself to being dark and moody and whatnot. But one thing I thought was interesting, kind of contrast with that, was did you notice at the beginning with that the one human guy that goes in there? I think his name's Dennis. I had to look that up. He's wearing a red jacket, and it really stands out on repeated viewings. He's the only one who's wearing anything color, and it's red. And then, of course, you have the bright red blood just coming out of the sprinklers, which is a great visual and like completely unexpected. And then you're like, the lights come up, it's like bloodbath and whatnot. So I thought that was really interesting that kind of just tagged him, so to speak, that he's the one. It's easy to pick out that he's the one human in this feast, apparently.
Yeah, that rave party they did was quite a thing. I don't know, shooting blood, water out of the rain or the little fire suppression thing. Yeah. That was quite a take on that. At that point, I was like, "Am I watching the dance scene from Matrix?" Is what it was.
Yeah,
you know which one I'm talking about.
No, I know. Celebrating. The second one, and it's just like just goes on forever.
I couldn't remember if it was the second or third one, but I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm watching Matrix right here." Morpheus just talked, and everybody's going to dance now. So, but then Blade shows up, and it was interesting. The camera work on this.
Mm-hmm.
He is emotionless through the whole movie. He does not show emotion. He doesn't get anything. But then after he hits this one amazing shot on someone, gives a little fist pump and and you see him smile.
Yeah.
And I smirked and laughed at that because I thought, I know Wesley Snipes kind of kept straight face through the whole movie. And then that's the one part where you see him really enjoy what he's doing. So it was kind of very pointed placement.
One thing that I wanted to point out about I love how you described his entrance. And what I noticed that with the camera work is that you have lots of kind of mids and close-up shots of all the dancers. It's very kind of claustrophobic, very zoomed in quite close on them. You don't really get to see full bodies until Blade shows up. And then you've got him like at a full shot. You can see him from head to toe, and it's almost like curtains parting where you get to see him in the middle, and he's right directly in the middle, and everything's in slow motion. Like, this is important.
Yeah.
So I loved that quite a bit. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was, you know how tall Wesley Snipes is? Take a wild guess. I don't. Yeah, he's 5'9".
Are you kidding me?
He's 5'9", and so you got a lot of low angles looking up at him to make him look more imposing. And I thought that was fascinating. And especially even with the reveal, the first thing you see of Blade actually is his feet, right? Because you got the dentist guy sliding across the floor, and then you see his boots, and then it kind of pans up to reveal Blade, which I think is just a great character reveal. And then you have, of course, the kind of the parting of the curtains thing. So I thought that was really interesting how much they use that low angle to make him look big.
They do. Looking at some of these photos, they do have a lot of up angles. Do you think they make him wear like lifts in his shoes for this?
I mean, they can do that too. There's things you put guys on Apple boxes or whatnot, but there's a lot of low angle looking up at him. He definitely feels, and even if he's not tall per se, he's imposing because he's what kind of guy he is, right? That he's facing down danger and puts his life in his hands every day. Some other interesting things I thought was in the Temple of Eternal Night. That's the La Magra Temple at the end. You got some great bird's eye view looking straight down to show you just how tall that building is. And just the camera follows Blade a lot through that last little bit once he kind of powers up after drinking the blood, and then he's just taking out minion after minion, just going all the way through. And quite a few like one shots following the action. So I thought that was pretty great.
The one thing I noticed about that temple that they did that in, how much sand-colored bright shots we got in that, and formal dress. All of a sudden, everybody's dressed formally, and it is the only main white area that you see. Like all the sand inside was bright lights versus the dark of everything else. All movie, you've had dark and bluish tint on everything. Even when they're outside, there was a tint. But then when you got into that blood ceremony, that whole interior was white sandstone looking colors, bright colors. So it was a different take on it.
Yeah. That's a good point. Especially you talked about like in the boardroom and stuff, and like the vampire culture is, and even see like Deacon hanging out. Everything is very dark, and then this one place is very,
this
very
one
bright.
place, this one temple, this one ceremony. Everything was super bright in that room, like that. Yeah. When they held the guys up there and the blood was dripping down on them, that whole room was just all white. And I thought it was pointed to. It shows you there was not a lot of green screen effect in there. Those were actual. I mean, sound stages or whatever those were stages they made. Those were practical effects. They weren't the green screen that you might have so much today, because it stood out too much if it was those scenes that they did it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so when you see like the stop motion skeleton things coming, stands out pretty good. Yeah, that's true. The rest of it, I would, is definitely a set. Right, it's 98. Yeah. They don't have the ability to do like the volume or whatnot like they would do now.
I do got to point this out because I had this question in my camera work: is why there was such a tight scene on this car. By the way, is beautiful. I absolutely love this '69 Charger they use here. I think it might be the same one from Fast and the Furious. I'm not sure. Why is Chris Christopherson so sloppy with gas when he's filling it up? And it's such a tight scene. They zoom in on it. Yeah. And he's smoking, and he's just like, just spilling, squirting before I even get in the tank. It's all over the side of this beautiful car. And I'm going to light up a cigarette right here.
Characterization. I love it.
What the heck? This camera shot was very intentional.
Yeah. Just slopping it in there. Yeah. I just to kind of sneak preview my way down to like costume design and stuff, like his scraggly hair and his beard and stuff. Like it's just without him even saying anything, you know who this guy is. He just doesn't give two F's. Like that's it. Whatever.
Yeah.
I could die tomorrow. Who cares?
It's got a limp. I mean, it's just, knew.
I love it.
You know, he's the mentor who rescued Blade at that point. You're just like, I accept it and I move on.
Yeah, created for the film, which I thought was a fascinating note. Like I would have assumed that character, a character that well drawn, had been in the comics world. He's in it now, but before the movie had not existed. So kudos to David Goyer on that. Yeah, David Goyer wrote the script for this guy, who did, among many other things, Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy and Man of Steel and some other things that are of less repute. But this is Blade. The Blade trilogy is his baby. So. We'll be talking about him a lot. Anything else you want to talk about cinematography before we move on to sound?
No, I've got to. No.
Yeah, okay, Dole, hit it with sound. What do you got for effects, soundtrack, vocal sounds, any of those things?
The part that really stood out to me was after the girl had gotten bit and was back at her apartment and he was using her for bait, was how silent it was. Like throughout this movie, you've got noise going everywhere, right? And you've got some music in the background at times. And I never seem to notice that as strongly as you do. But when she was back at her place, it was silent and the footsteps in her as she's walking through. And it made it a very eerie feeling. I mean, one, you're talking vampires, you're talking a darkness anyway. But you're also talking about a loneliness here as she's walking, trying to get her stuff packed. And then that cop is all of a sudden in her room, in her apartment. And at that point, that's the first sounds you start hearing. Other than that, you didn't hear a voice for probably 90 seconds, 2 minutes, right? They were in the elevator. It was silent. Walking down the hallway, it was silent. You hear the footsteps, and you know that somebody was, making those for the movie. It was very powerful to me because it just made me feel like, oh yeah, something's coming up and Blade's going to come in here somewhere. So I thought that was a very strong effect to do that, to give us that eeriness and the quietness because it's vampires and it's got to be unsettling a little bit, especially with that kind of silence.
Yeah. The lack of sound is a really interesting take. I mean, I didn't really have a whole lot to look at with effects other than kind of the vamps crumbling to ash. I thought was a really kind of a cool effect. As well as like the sound of the punches. It's almost like an Indiana Jones level of punch. It's super loud and the swords ringing out, I thought were cranked up a little bit. And I enjoyed that. And definitely emphasized each hit and each clanging of the swords. So that was cool. What do you think about the music?
The music I thought was good. The rave party was, it just felt to me very rock oriented or very techno music, at that time, which was big in the 90s to hit that kind of scene. But I other than that, Craig, I never noticed it as strongly as you do to tell me who was on the soundtrack or something that was important in there that I missed. I'm telling you.
Yeah. No, it is a weird mix because there is some like straight up orchestral stuff. And then also some techno stuff. But we hear that like in the club, like diegetically, and then we also hear it as part of the score. And we have Mark Isham, who also did Point Break, A River Runs Through It, some very more classical scores, right? Nell, Crash, Waterworld, and then this one. So it's kind of a departure from his normal stuff. But I thought that was interesting that sometimes you couldn't tell if it was supposed to be diegetic or non-diegetic. Because like when Blade shows up, like the music kind of fades out and then it kicks in again when he starts killing guys. And it's like, is that the music in the club? Is the music kicked back up while he's killing guys? Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But there was some early, great diegetic choices. Like I love, again, as Whistler's working, you hear CCNR, Creedence Clearwater Revival, playing Bad Moon Rising, which I think is on the nose, but it's fun.
That might have been Chris Christopherson just playing some background music in there. That would fit.
Just turn the cameras on while he's doing stuff.
Yeah.
One that I had to look up is when Blade enters the clinic and goes through the club. There's those the girls rapping, the Asian girls. It's an actual group. I'm gonna probably butcher the name. Bangwa Cherry, I think, is the name of the group, playing Chin Chin, and that always slayed me. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
So
oh my gosh, that's a real. They got a music video and everything.
Yeah, they're a real group. And then at the very end, you have a song called "Playing with Lightning" by a group called Expansion Union. That's where Blade's taken out, like the final bit of Frost guys before the final fight shows up. So
yeah,
a really interesting mix. Like it didn't bother me. Like sometimes I watch stuff from that, and like, I'm a huge Alias fan, and Alias is like 2001's when it started. It does a lot of the similar things like that too. And sometimes those music tracks don't age as well. And maybe I'm looking at this through nostalgia glasses. It'd be interesting to see someone who hadn't seen this movie, if they listen to the music, wow, that's so old. That sounds weird. For me, it's just like, that's just part of the whole vibe.
Yeah. For vocal sounds, one thing I want to point out that stood out to me was the scene where after gosh dang it, these names I'm terrible with. I'm sorry. The main vampire, the villain.
Yeah, Deacon Frost.
Deacon Frost, and he's kidnapped the girl again, right? And so we're waiting on Blade, and Blade's getting all set up. Chris Christopherson just died, so Blade's doing his meditation thing he's doing right there, I guess. And she says, she's taunting him a little bit, and he says, it's real quiet, and then he all of a sudden has this booming voice, like you could tell they mic'd it or amped it up. And he says, I'll tell you what, sister, we're at the top of the food chain. When he says that, like you could tell it was in a microphone and it was synthesized and it had a boom to it, which that was that dark guttural kind of loud voice. And so I thought that was a great way to kind of emphasize just that he was, one, he was cocky and arrogant, and two, powerful, ready to go and just waiting and trying to play this game. So I thought it was a very strong vocal sound to throw in there, and you knew it was amplified to kind of portray his character.
Yeah, that's nice. I didn't really have a ton from that for that category. I pretty much just had the muffled radio transmission where you hear in Blade's earpiece where before Whistler shows up at the clinic and catch you effers at a bad time, that whole bit at the archives. Drops your F-bombs. So good.
There were a lot of F-bombs in this Marvel movie.
A lot of F-bombs. Well, speaking of F-bombs and dialogue, there's lots of fun lines in this. So I had a hard time narrowing it down, but I'm curious, Corey, if you had one or two things that you really liked to quote from this movie, or
well, you took it right in the opening when you said some mother effers are always trying to ice skate uphill. Yeah. And it's that is such a great line. But I'm going to give my first quote I'm going to go with is Chris Christopherson when he's talking about that flashlight that he gave for Blade, that UV light that's going to burn which they use on that big fat sloth thing.
On Pearl.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that was a terrible scene that ruined me. But But he says it's still heavy. And then Chris Christopherson says, well, you're so big. And he was. Snipes is absolutely jacked in this movie, but just the way he says it, well, you're so big. So why can't it be heavy?
Yeah.
It was great.
Nice. Most of the ones I had actually were Blade talking to Karen. And I'm just going to go in chronological order. The first one, I'll just use this one. It's perfect one to start with. He says, you better wake up. The world you live in is just a sugar-coated topping. There's another world beneath it, the real world. And if you want to survive it, you better learn to pull the trigger. But I love the way he says sugar-coated topping. It's almost seems like out of character, but he's talking down to her. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You have another one, Corey, that you want to throw out?
I like the one where Blade says, there's other things worse than vampires out tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Me. And it's great because it's just, he's such a sorry for this. He's such a badass. It's just fantastic. He's a great hero with, all their power, and it's a great point.
And I'm glad that you had that one. I had that one too, but the thing that I have forgotten when I watch this movie, I forget that she doesn't know that he is the Daywalker at that point. Like, that's not revealed until pretty late in the movie, and to us as well. Like, we get, like, we've mentioned, like, the origin story is kind of just seeped in there here and there. We don't get a straight up, like, here's this deal, here's his powers, here's his origin. And so, she's kind of the audience stand-in. So she doesn't know that he's a Daywalker. We don't really know. We just know that he kills vampires. So we've seen vampire hunters before, but we don't know, like, why he's doing this and why he's so powerful. But another one I had from that, I think it's from that same conversation, where he's taking the watch off of Krieger, the cop. He's like, oh, great, you're robbing him. You're going to rob me too. And he says, how do you think that we fund this organization? We're not exactly the March of Dimes.
I had that one marked. We're not
just
exactly
another
the March of Dimes.
Wow. He self-aware. I think that's what I really, really liked about that one. Like, yeah, we know what kind of movie we were in. Like, I have to steal. That's fine.
All right, I'm going to go with my most recent. This is the last quote that I have. Otherwise, I'm reaching through here.
Yeah.
Is from Deadpool and Wolverine, when he says, there's only ever been one blade. There's only ever going to be one blade.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that was a perfect Wesley Snipes at his peak Blade moment to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly hope that comes out. Ryan Reynolds is working for it, I hope, and that there's a Blade movie that comes out of this.
Yeah, I think there's an audience for that.
Absolutely.
That was the one cameo in Deadpool Wolverine that I did not see coming at all. And there's history with it. I know you haven't seen Blade Trinity yet, but you do know Ryan Reynolds is in that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've seen enough TikTok videos that have shown me those two bantering back and forth.
Yes.
So
good.
And
and you get the ice skating uphill call back in Deadpool and Wolverine as well. Kind of his signature line. As far as body language, facial expressions, I also had the grin from the beginning, which is a little bit out of character, but it's fun.
Yeah.
I really like the at the beginning in the hospital where the cops shoot him and he's kind of taken aback, and it's like the way he steps back, it's not like he's hurt. He's just like, what are you doing?
Like, he's screwed up. Yeah. Like, absolutely.
He's not scared. He's just like, why?
I'm the good guy. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the martial arts are fantastic. And it's not just one form. There's several forms that he's using here. So I think the fight choreography is very, very strong in this film. And I think a lot of it is in camera too. So I think that's pretty great.
The fight choreography is very strong in this movie. Wesley Snipes, I always feel like he puts in the time for some of these. The end got a little bit 90s. His fighting to get to the bad guy was very 90s. Like, I'm just going to walk through about 40 guys and I'm going to punch this one, kick this one, roundhouse kick this one. I'm going to use this guy and throw him across the room. And the one I made a GIF for it, Craig. It was absolutely incredible. Was he kicks the guy through the door into a hole, hops in the hole, kicks him out of the hole. And I said, you ever been so mad at somebody you kicked into the hole and then kick them out of the hole? Then you're mad. I mean, it was like he's just in a rage. One punch, one kick, one punch, one kick.
Totally went God mode in that section. Like, and it's then all of a sudden
gets to Frost and it's like, all right, let's have a sword fight. Like that's 1998 at its peak right there.
Love it so much. Yeah, it's cheesy in all the best ways. As far as costumes go, I like Blade's outfit quite a bit. I think it's very well put together. It's utilitarian in a lot of ways. Like, it looks cool, but like that vest is clearly heavily armored. But yeah, the trench coats and the boots, the sunglasses at night all the time. Like, sure, that's just cool looking.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. He looks older now without his sunglasses. I've seen a couple set photos, and he definitely looks different. And so I feel like he's got to keep the glasses on if he for the Blade look to still work. But
yeah. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Pearl earlier, so I think there's a couple of really good extreme makeup things. Like, Pearl is disgusting. Like, that's clearly someone in a suit, but it feels real. It is disgusting. Like, and I know they mentioned the smell, and like I could almost smell it.
Yeah, what was the point of Pearl being that big? Like, I'm not in the comics, so I don't.
Well, I mean, the way I get it, like, Pearl was running the computer system, so Pearl never got to or had to leave, and so Pearl just became very sedentary.
Oh,
yeah. But definitely. Then one I also want to point out was Quinn, the burnt flesh. Makeup they did at the beginning, I thought was really realistic and creepy as hell. And just, I mean, that's when you're like, and that's at the beginning, like, what kind of, like, oh yeah, you're in a horror movie. It's an action movie as well, but like, it leans into horror pretty good in a couple of things, and that was definitely one of them.
Quinn, I hated him and I loved him. He's such a good bad guy.
I love Quinn.
And halfway through the movie, I was thinking he's like Ike Clanton from Tombstone. Like, you hate the guy, and you're like, I know he's going to get it in the end. I know he's going to get it in the end. And when he does, I'm going to be so happy because you deserve every bit of it. And I felt like his death deserved more. I was a little disappointed with how he got killed. I was upset about it. So I wanted him to suffer more than just getting one swipe with the sword and just burn into ashes. So,
yeah,
because I wanted another arm cut off. I wanted him to suffer more.
Yeah.
It was, but because he was a good villain.
Yeah,
he was a good villain. But
and this is the thing. I said something in the text chain earlier that watching these movies and kind of pretending that they're all part of the same universe, they're not.
Yeah,
but it works most of the time. But this is one instance where it kind of doesn't, because Donald Logue is in Ghost Rider as a completely different character. Although I suppose you could probably headcanon your way into putting him in there, but. Yeah, I think he's great comic relief, and he does die a little soon. Yeah, it's fun to watch him get tortured, though.
It is.
All right, setting and design. One thing I thought was really interesting. We talked about it being on a set. A lot of this was done in Los Angeles, which makes sense, and some in Death Valley, but most of it was actually filmed in the former Redken shampoo factory. In Canoga Park. So they must have built a ton of sets in that thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I feel like the practical sets on this were fantastic. It wasn't the 98s. I don't remember them doing a lot of green screen stuff, but this was a lot of sets, and just the whole fight scene at the end, the whole blood god ceremony area. There was some computer graphics on it. You could tell in some parts, but for the most part, I feel like somebody was making detailed stuff that they were fighting through and jumping through, and a lot of factory type stuff that they were filming in.
Yeah,
especially for his lair.
Yep, I had that too. And something that just occurred to me. So this is 98. Batman and Robin is 97. And so if you think about in consecutive years, like how cartoonish Batman and Robin is with the set design. And then to go this completely the other way, like before Nolan gets his hand on Batman and absolutely goes like real world type of stuff. What a departure! And how you do a comic book movie? We're going to make this about toys and almost like a cartoon. No, we're going hard R and as realistic as we can. So again, I don't think Blade gets enough credit for kind of reinventing it, kind of in a lot of ways being a template for what the MCU does become.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this movie definitely broke some ground there. So
yeah. As far as set decoration goes, when we talked about the ceiling sprinklers, that's kind of my big thing. The first thing, like, oh, this is the kind of movie we're in.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the council chambers and kind of how dark they are, but I thought also like those huge chairs and the table, like it really did speak to like how wealthy they were, how opulent that place was. Yeah, but there are a few things that are dated, the computer screens, lots of squares and whatnot. But it feels lived in. The whole place feels real, I think.
Well, and I'm also going to talk about the set decoration. You're going to talk about the records room with all those ancient parchments in there that just get demolished. Oh my gosh. I was like, no, the history.
I know. I feel bad about that too when that happens. No.
It just drove right through it. That was a very cool, like how they set that up with these parchments and the glass and all of that to set up this big fight and stuff, everything that's going to happen in there. That is a great room to do that in, to make it look like here's our history, here's our traditions and everything about it. And that was very cool looking. So
yeah, no,
I had a small feat to make all that and build all that. Whoever did that spent hours doing that, and then they demolished it. So
yeah, no, agreed. I had to look up like the budget, and it's, you know, adjusted for inflation. Who knows what this would be, but $45 million in 98.
Oh,
so it feels, again, talking about how this film holds up. Like you would, to make a movie look like this, they're going to spend 3 times that easy.
Yes.
Now, maybe 4 times to make a movie like this to look that good. This movie does not look cheap. You see it on the screen.
No, yeah. Do the other ones hold up this way?
It'll be interesting to see.
Okay.
That's part of the journey. I'm looking forward to doing that. That's another reason I want to watch them back to back to back. I've never watched them that way. I never watched it with intentionality that way. So I'm excited for our listeners to go on that journey with us and let us know what they think about that.
Yeah.
As far as props go, I'll make the big one I had was the sword, which of course has that, you know, fail-safe on it, the anti-theft device, which is a cool trick.
Which is very cool. The camera zooms in very close to show that little latch spinning around is a timer. Yep. And so when the Deacon Frost has it and clicks that timer off. It's
that's bad because he knows about it, right? He's been studying
he's
him.
Like, well, and he even says, I've been studying you. I've been watching you. I know all your tricks. I know where you go. So
you get that payoff, right? Like we like to talk about. We've seen what happens multiple times with that. It happens like 3 or 4 times, and then. But yeah, you mentioned the Dodge Charger, the UV lamp. One thing I thought was interesting in doing research on this is that, you know, in the comic, and so I found the Blade did not have the sword or the silver stakes, and it was like wooden stakes, very traditional vampire weapons, but they kind of updated him as like almost like a samurai, and I think it absolutely works.
One thing I've got to know for the props, and I don't remember what this was about. What was the root cutoff scene at the end? After he does his meditation, Chris Christopherson dies. He picks up a little tree, slices the roots off, and the camera makes a point to show it hit the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, did he just kill a tree? What was I'm cutting it off at the root. What's he doing here?
I did do some research on that, and I saw theories. I didn't see like a definitive thing what was happening there. I was like, is this an actual ceremony or whatnot? But it looked like he was in some way recommitting to the cause or cutting off from his half vampire roots, maybe because the plant was a hybrid of some kind. Was what somebody had said, and he's living in 2 worlds, and maybe this is him definitively choosing. I guess, but like he's been slaughtering vampires left and right indiscriminately. So I guess it's like I'm going for broke. I guess is kind of the idea. That's the way I always read it.
Most of the things in this movie were very clear. Like they pointed it out and then they gave some explanation, like the tattoos on the neck.
Yeah.
But that was too ambiguous to pick up.
Yeah. So I'm not sure on that. But those are some of the things that I read. So if anyone knows, I would love to hear.
Yeah.
Educate me.
Yeah.
As far as characters go, like we talked about Snipes repeatedly, and was the first choice for the role, and like as you said earlier, like there's only been one Blade ever, going to only be one Blade. Like he is, I can't, in so much the way that, whoever is going to play, Wolverine after Hugh Jackman, or Tony Stark after Robert Downey Jr. Good luck. Because he's perfect. And so I know there was a TV show and there's, a potential movie in the MCU, but that's not him. But he's fantastic.
I think the fan base really rallying up after that Deadpool Wolverine movie might, if they hadn't started filming it or casted for it, then they would seriously be considering.
Yeah. Well, I know it was in production, but had issues.
There's some momentum.
I really like Steven Dorff as Deacon Frost. I know you mentioned the Feldman thing. I think that actually works for him in this, like with the hair and everything, where he's kind of preppy a little bit. He's like almost like a spoiled rich kid type of thing. I think it absolutely worked. And that's a thing they've changed from the comics, where he was like an older guy in the comics. So
yeah,
I like that young upstart thing.
He does an incredible job at being young, cocky. Your time's done. It's my time now. Power hungry. Absolutely does a great job. Does a great job taunting Blade. He's an excellent villain. It's just one or two scenes where I thought, oh my gosh, if I looked away, would I think that was Corey Feldman? And so it threw me off. It's only on a couple scenes. And
he's kind of that generation, that group of guys though too. So
yeah. But he's a very accomplished actor, very good.
Yeah.
But he does a great job.
We talked about Chris Christopherson at length, and he's great in this as well. I'm going to do my best to not butcher her name. Unbouché Wright as Dr. Karen Jensen. Exactly. She's quite good in this. Again, as kind of the audience stand-in and expressing the right amount of, I don't believe this to be real.
Yeah.
Like she's in a vampire movie and she grounds the movie, I think, really, really well. But I think it's also interesting that she's, we hear the term strong female character or whatever, but I mean, she literally is. Like, she saves herself. She's very smart. She's not a Mary Sue. Like, she's an accomplished doctor and figures out how to, that vampirism is a sexually transmitted disease, the way she says it. And it's a blood disorder, and that's her specialty. And I love that she had something to do. She wasn't just a damsel in distress. So I thought that was kind of a cool addition to this story.
She's not in the second one?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, because I think she needed to. Yeah. Bring back Chris Christopherson. Let's let her go. I mean, she was fantastic in the movie. Absolutely.
Yeah, she's really good.
But she's not an anchor character that you can pull off for.
But again, like we talked about, like, it's not an origin story. So they're not going to show us Blade's origin. And I had this down for like Hero's Journey because it's not that. It doesn't need to be that. But you need a way in, and having someone who has to have things explained to them works in another way. So she's just, audience surrogate. I really like, I mentioned Donald Logue as Quinn, just hilarious. But Udo Kier, Dragonetti, the guy who gets his teeth ripped out and then burns into that guy is so bizarre and so great in everything that he's in. Like that whole scene with Frost, he's like, "You bore me." Just I love it. He's so weird and so great in everything.
Really? I just remember him from Ace Ventura.
That's when I was going to.
Every time I go to, I'm just like, well, does your friend have a name, or should I call him?
Lawyer?
Like that's what I go to.
Yeah,
every time.
But he's great in that, and he's great in this, and there's not the same type of movie at all. So like, the guy, he can kind of just plug him in wherever, and like he's just odd and it works. But I think those are the main ones that I wanted to hit.
Those are the main characters. Everybody else, there's a few big names that are in there that are in a
Sana
couple different
Lathan
shows.
as Eric's mom, Vanessa. She's been in quite a few things. She was in this is a horrible thing to associate with, but Alien versus Predator, she was in that. Some other things. Yeah,
like Judson Scott was in Star Trek Wrath of Khan. I remember him.
Oh yeah,
he was great.
That's right. Yeah.
Tracy Lords. She was
the infamous Tracy
Lords.
Johnny
Depp movie. Yeah. So those are some people that are big names back in the 90s that were.
Yeah, and people you recognize.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know their names, which is kind of fun. One thing I found that was kind of interesting. So the director Stephen Norrington, who hasn't really he's made like 2 big films. He made The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which we should totally do at some point as well. It has a lot of the same editing and cinematography, and that's it. That's all he's done. There was a deleted scene, and you can find it on YouTube. It's not hard to find, where he actually plays Michael Morbius before Jared Leto, but it's like really far away. You can't really see that it's him, because that's tied directly together. Blade and Morbius, so that's kind of fun.
Oh, okay.
So Google that if you want. It's kind of fun.
Tim McGee is an actor in Blade. He was the cop from The Apartment. He's also in Iron Man.
Oh,
so there's another MCU connection. I'm just saying, conspiracy theory, Easter egg. I think I've got a fan theory that after he was in Blade, he went into the Air Force and became. He's the guy. He's so annoying in Iron Man 2, but anyway. So
perfect. It's all connected.
Yeah.
Let's see here. We talked about Hero's Journey and how it's not that. And I said about how. Go ahead.
I do think Chris Christopherson's death was a big rallying point.
Sure.
For him, a death of a mentor there, because after that we automatically get a good 5-6 hours of prep work in bullets and meditation, and I was like,
recommits.
What? Yeah, like recommits himself. I felt like that scene was a little like, okay, wait a minute. Like there's a dead body right over here, and you're going to start like meditating, and all the bad guys are just sitting on a couch waiting. And so I was like, okay, but that was 90s. We got away with
that. Let's see. As far as world building goes, we've mentioned this before, but I think that it did a really good job introducing this for most of us, brand new character and the surrounding mythology, and also just builds effectively on established vampire lore. It didn't mess with vampire lore, which I hate when things do that. Like, sorry, Twilight fans, but sparkly vampire, not a
sparkly
thing, right? Like I want it to build on Bram Stoker. That's what I want it to do, and so I know what I'm getting into. Like, it's a guy who's going to kill vampires, and you know what kind of things vampires do. And I mean, they talk about it. There's lines about like what it does, and crosses don't do things. It's got to be silver and whatever. But and I'll also love the fact that they reference the fact that there's vampire movies and there's vampire fiction out there. That you would know something about this. That some of that stuff's true, but it's the real version. So. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
That's final thoughts on Blade, Corey.
I think my final thought on Blade is it is a fun ride. It's a good ride. There's a few things you have to suspend your belief for. In the fact that it's a 90s movie and has some 90s influences that are very apparent. But I do feel like this movie holds up today. I feel like this movie, if it were made today, would have a different arc. It might definitely have a darker tone on some things. This still had a dark tone, but it was a 90s dark tone, which felt different. Today's dark tone would have a little bit more scarier stuff, more jump scares and things like that. But the fight scenes hold up. Wesley Snipes hold up. I think this shows Wesley Snipes is a fan favorite. I feel like this would be great to get him back into, if he doesn't get another movie, a standalone movie for Blade, he definitely needs to be brought back in somewhere in the MCU timeline with what Ryan Reynolds did in Deadpool Wolverine. Like, it shows people love Snipes, and this man deserves to be out there bringing this character back, because it showed people love it. They love this character. They love the nostalgia of him, and they love seeing him in that suit again.
Yeah, I think people have a lot of fondness for this film and for this character. And, I looked at some of the reviews and it's interesting because, again, I remember like up until very recently, like within the last 10, 15 years, like Rotten Tomatoes wasn't a thing. And, the whole aggregation of reviews, and you choose whether something's rotten or not, or fresh. This film has a 58%, so it's technically rotten. Whatever. But I remember this film was like loved. It was loved. It was appreciated, and lots of people really enjoyed it. And it was a blockbuster. It was absolutely financially successful on a very lean budget, sure. And I was just thinking, kind of in a lot of ways, has some things in common with like John Wick. Like, there's not a lot of lore. There's just enough, and it's a smaller story. It knows exactly what it is and gets in and out in 2 hours. Roger Ebert did give it 3 out of 4 stars, which is nice, I think. But I enjoyed the crap out of it. I really enjoyed rewatching this movie, and like I said, when Deadpool and Wolverine came out, seeing Wesley Snipes was a great surprise. Oh yeah, I love that character, and I would like to see more of him. And I really enjoyed this film. I can't wait to watch the next couple with you guys, and just keep going through this series. So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on X, Instagram, and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and review us on iTunes or Spotify. And as we said, our next episode will continue our Marvel Before the MCU series and be a review of X-Men from 2000. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from X-Men, and we'll share it on the next episode.